Okay, so hello everyone. Good day. I hope you're doing great today. So welcome back to our video lecture sessions. So unfortunately, we were not able to do any face-to-face sessions today. So, well, instead of that, for you not to have any um, delay with our sessions or with our topics, then we are to have this recorded lecture, and I do hope that you will view this one. Oh my goodness, I'd be heartbroken if you won't. But anyway, what do you think will be our topic for today? Do you have any idea? Because the last time, if I remember correctly, we had a review as to the basic information about literature. And this time, what do you think will be our topic all about? All right. So let me share to you our topic for today. Okay. So we are to talk about the timeline of Philippine literature. So as you can see, we're here. Okay. So the timeline of Philippine literature. Now, before we go on to the different periods of Philippine literature, I'd like to ask, why is it important to study, or why is it important for us to have the timeline of Philippine literature? I know it's just a list of different periods, characteristics, different literary stories, but why so? Why is it so important to have this timeline? Well, then, I have I have several factors, key points to reasons to give you as to why it is important to study this timeline of Philippine literature. Well, this timeline, this Philippine timeline, or this timeline of Philippine literature helps us in understanding how Philippine literature evolved alongside the country's history. Okay, we've been through different historical periods, right? Well, then this will enable us to really see how our how literature evolved here in the Philippines, like alongside the country's history from pre-colonial times to Spanish colonization up to the contemporary times. So each period reflects the social, political conditions and the cultural influences of the time. So, not only that, this timeline of literature showcases the richness of Philippine culture, traditions, and values. This timeline will help us appreciate, you know, the diversity. It helps us appreciate the diversity of literary expressions, and that is indeed integral part of our nation's identity. This timeline or through this timeline, one can see the development of literary forms, themes, and genres, such as the transition from oral literature, such as epic and folk tales, to written literature. What are those? Like poetry, novels, and short stories. Lastly, this um, this also this timeline highlights the works of prominent Filipino writers across different eras, helping students and scholars to recognize the contributions of these authors to both Philippine and world literature. And because I also remember the last time when I asked this class, who is your favorite author, or do you know any Filipino author? Most of you said Jose Rizal. And I know, I mean, he is a great writer, but there are many great writers here in the Philippines, and that is for us to discover. Okay, so I hope you're ready because we are to move on to the first period in this timeline of Philippine literature. Now, do you have any guess what our first period is? Well, the first one we have here, pre-colonial period. Okay, so during this time, the literature is based on oral traditions, when the stories were just passed from one generation to another through um through stories, word by mouth, like that, crude on ideology and physiology. The literature here consisted both in written and oral language. Uh, consisted both written and oral language, or of oral literature, which was the language, or the oral literature was the language of daily life. Okay, so the words that they used in this period um are very, how I'm looking for the right word for it. Ganun. It is just used in their daily lives, not like the words we have today. I mean, we can use far or more complex words today, diba? But in this time, they more on use of simple terms, simple words. Now, the earliest alphabet, we call it Alibata, of Asokan origin, consisted of 17 letters with 3 vowels and 14 consonants. So yes, Alibata was used during this time, and it's just so sad that um, it's not used anymore. This is supposed to be part of our identity as Filipinos, but unfortunately, due to colonization, it was then eradicated, and yeah, it just remained. It is now just a part of our history. But anyway, moving on, we have here the different literatures of colonial period. So we have here part of oral tradition. We have bugtong, riddles. This is a puzzling question to be solved or guessed. Salawikain, or proverbs, witty sayings using metaphors aimed to teach values. I believe you are familiar with this one already. And the last one is Tanaza. This is a mono-rhyming, heptasyllabic chain expressing insight and lesson. Next, the folk songs during pre-colonial periods are hele, oyai, or a lullaby. A kumintang, this is a war song. Back then, with our with Filipino natives, um, they used to have war among different clans, and they, to boost their morale, they are to sing this song, or they are to sing a war song. And then the next one, which is very familiar to many, which is harana, or serenade. So I wonder if the girls here were able to be serenaded by someone, by their loved one, or were the boys in this class able to serenade someone back then? I really hope this kind of culture here in the Philippines will not deteriorate, because it's just so sad. This is really romantic. Not just a text, because people these days just do texting, and they um they try to court that way, but back then they have, you know, more effort. Like, they give maximum effort and a very big impact. But these days, like, just a minimum effort, and then people are expecting for it to become, or for it to have maximum impact. But anyway, moving on. So we have here Tiana, or um Ihiman. So this is a wedding song. And then we have Talindao, boat song, and then Balitao, a love song. Okay, next. Oh, so we have here different folk tales. In the pre-colonial period, we have myths, legends, and epics, and I believe these three aren't even new to you. We've talked about this one with our last topic. So myths, it explains how the world was created and other phenomena. We also have legends, not the one with the blue sea, but legends. This then explains the origin of things. The last one, epics, narrates evolving or narratives evolving around supernatural events or heroic deeds. Okay, so the notable works during pre-colonial periods are Biag ni Lamang, an epic centered on the life of and adventures of Ilocano folk hero named Lamang. Do you remember this story? I hope you still do, because we are going to talk about this one the coming days if we have still time. And then we have the next one, which is Hinila Wood. This is an epic from Panay, which recounts the exploits of three um, Suludnon demonic god brothers. Okay. Now, we have the next one, which is colonial period. Do you still remember what happened to this period? Do you have any idea what happened here? So during colonial period, this was when, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, this was when we were colonized by Spaniards. Do you still remember how many years we were captured or we were colonized by Spaniards? It was 333 years, not days, but years. But anyway, because they've stayed here for long, their influence not just to our language, to our culture, they influence like um their influence became really wide because they stayed here for long. So they influenced us not just in our cultures and traditions, but also in our language and literature. Now, it has two distinct classifications. We have here the regional and secular. Now, also, Spanish became the medium of communication. So this time, the native Filipino was then slowly removed and then changed with Spanish. And then Alibata was replaced by Roman script. So this is where my heart was broken because we were to have Alibata as our writing if this didn't happen. So anyway, Filipinos were formally introduced to an educational system. So this happened during colonial period. Now, in literature, early colonial literature was limited to religious topics. So if you still remember, during this time, religious or religion was then introduced to Filipinos, and it influenced us in various ways, and it included literature. That's why during this period, literature was just limited to religious topics. Now, Filipinos were introduced to religious materials such as prayer books, novenas, doctrines, crucifixions, and the lives of saints. So the once highly imaginative folk narratives were replaced by sober and religious writings. So gone are the folk stories, epics, and then was replaced with religious writings. So poetry developed in form and literature, but the religious undertone remained evident. Okay, so in colonial period, epic were overshadowed by emergence of awit, which is heroic poem, and then corrido, or a legendary religious poem. So early form of Philippine drama during the Spanish colonial period were dulpo and karagatan. Okay, so more popular dramas were later introduced, such as the Cenaculo. This is the enactment of life and sufferings of Christ. And then Moro Moro, this is a play between Christians and Muslims. And the Zarzuela, which is a musical poetry. The different notable works during the colonial period is one written by Gaspar Aquino de Belen, Ang Mahal na Pasyon ni Jesucristo ang Panginoon namin. So this is an outstanding Christian narrative poem intended by the religious authorities to replace the heathen epics. And then we also have Bernardo Carpio, a myth about the legendary strongman of Montalban. So the uh-huh. And then another set of notable works we have here, Ibong Adarna. This is a corrido about the mythical bird with healing powers and the three brothers in the quest for the magical bird. I believe you still remember this one. This was discussed when you were in high school, I believe. And then we have here Florante at Lara, another famous story, right? Way back when you were in high school. So Florante and Laura, this is an awit on the struggle and the love of the Duke Florente and Princess Lara of Albania. Any question? As if you can answer me. It's like, it became a thing for me to ask any question, as if someone will ask me, yes, ma'am, I have. Okay, moving on. Because I believe there will be no question asked anyway. But if you do, you may comment down in the comment section below or in our chat box, by the way. So, yes, you can ask questions. However, I cannot answer it right now because this is a recorded lecture, right? Okay, moving on. So, this is where the juicy part of the Philippine literature is. So we have here revolutionary period. Now this planted the seed of nationalism. So Filipino starts to become more aware of what's happening within the country and um wants to get rid of the shackles that is around the country. I mean, we were just prisoners of our own country, weren't we? Okay, next. Language shifted from Spanish to Tagalog and then addresses the masses instead of the elites. So, um, instead of focusing on the elites, focus na dito na sa masses. Okay, so in the revolutionary period, propaganda literature was really famous. So reformatory and objectives. Now there are two under this literature. We have political essays and political novels. So when we say political essays, satires, editorials, and news articles were written to expose the evil of Spanish rule. So this is why Filipinos are trying to fight back against the Spaniards. Okay, so next we have political novels. Okay, so here comes our very famous Jose Rizal. So Rizal's novels were meant to awaken the minds of Filipinos, and I believe he did it really well. So also the revolutionary literature, this is more propagandistic than literary in nature. So political essays help in frame the spirit of revolution, and poetry or poems of the period focus on love for the country. We have here different notable works of revolutionary period. We have Jargon Tagalog, founded by Marcelo H. Del Pilar. We also have La Solidaridad, the famous publication by propagandist. We also have No Limitangere and El Filibusterismo. It's very famous, right? The two novels written by Jose Rizal that paved way to the revolutions. And El Verdadero Decalogo, the true Decalogue. Apollinario Mabini's literary piece, which aimed to propagate nationalism. Okay. So from revolutionary period, let's go on to the post-colonial period or the American regime. So after Spaniards, here comes Americans. So, kala nyo tapos na, hindi pa. Okay, so the characteristics during this time where Americans came here in the Philippines. Okay, this was when English was introduced in the second decade of the 20th century. So the literary works were written in three languages now. Can you believe it? Tagalog, Spanish, and English. So people became really multilingual during this time. And if you are privileged enough back then you'll be able to learn these three languages. And more Filipino writers emerged and wrote free verse plays and critical essays. Now, also the Philippine literature became commercialized in the 1920s when weekly magazines Liwayway and Bisaya published stories. And then most literary works centered on nationalism, love for country, sense of belongingness, loss of identity, and heroism. So if you're gonna look through, like the first one we have here during the pre-colonial period, we have stories. It's more of an entertainment type, right? Um, they focused on um stories, epics, legends, although we also have folk songs, pero the highlight there really are the adventures. Then we move on to colonial period, which highlights religion. So mo na siya highlights colonial period. The literary works were then related to religion. And then if we move on to the revolutionary period, this is now the start of nationalism, which then continued to post-colonial period. Okay, so nationalism is still there, and a sense of belongingness starts to emerge. So as loss of identity and heroism. So I hope that was clear for you. Okay, so we have here period of apprenticeship. This is during 1910 to 1920. Filipino writers imitated English and American models, and poems during period were amateurish and mushy. Okay, so dili pa ingana ka-established. They're still trying, okay, imitating. Next, we have here period of emergence. Now, highly influenced by Western literary trends like Romanticism and realism. So that's what happened to our literature also in post-colonial periods, especially in the period of emergence. And then we also have here literary carefully works were um, literary carefully works were intelligently crafted. So next, the few notable works um during post-colonial period, we have Child of Sorrow, written by Zolio Galang, the first Philippine novel in English. Okay. And then we have here Dead Stars by Paz Marquez Benitez, the first short story in English written in the country. So we're gonna talk about the Dead Stars later on our lectures. Okay. Next one is The Footnote of Youth, written by Jose Garcia Villa, one of the early short stories during the period, which tackles a delicate subject matter on teenage marriage. Okay, it's a very beautiful story. Mm, I believe we are going to talk about this one as well. And then we have the last one, which is Ninay, the very first Filipino novel written in Tagalog. So from Americans, we're still not done yet because we now have Japanese occupation. See, can you believe it? From our native Filipino, tapos it became Spanish and then Tagalog and English, and then there comes Japanese. Now, Tagalog writers started to write in simple language and free verse. Okay, this is what's happening during Japanese occupation. And then fiction prevailed over poetry. The Japanese censored all publications except Tribune and Philippine Review. And Japanese language, Nihongo or Nippongo, was introduced but not but not well embraced by the Filipino. So, can you imagine if Filipinos were so open to Japanese at this time? Probably it was because during the previous periods, Filipinos learned something from the Spaniards. Like, uh, we're over the language thing. Probably. This is my thought about it. And then, nationalism became really important or became really prominent. So probably that's why Japanese or Nihongo wasn't really that embraced by Filipinos. Because what if they did? Then that's gonna be four languages for us. So we have Tagalog, Spanish, English, and then Japanese. Like, wow. Okay, next. A few notable works were exposed during the Japanese occupation. Writers were then exposed to new literary forms such as haiku and tanka. So we have haiku and tanka. The haiku one, 17 syllables divided into five, three lines, which is 575. And then tanka, widely similar to haiku, but has 31 syllables divided into five lines. Okay, so many Filipino writers wrote plays, poems, short stories, etc., in Tagalog and other vernacular languages, which is nice. It really does help us embrace, or we can say that during Japanese occupation, Filipino writers become more diving into using Tagalog and even other vernacular languages. And topics and themes were often life in the provinces to escape Japanese control and censorship. So still, we are at some point still caged within another um, colony within this period. So the few literary stories here during the Japanese occupation. So dili lang kini kalasa. There are so many. These are just the few and notable ones. So if you are curious as to different stories, you can search more online. Okay. So we have here Suyuan sa Tubigan by Marciano Pineda, tells us the story of Matilde, a woman in a tranquil countryside struggling with unrequited love and societal expectations. We also have Lupang Tinubuan by Narciso Reyes, delves into the profound connection between a person and their homeland. So Reyes' eloquent prose vividly portrays rural landscape, evoking strong sense of cultural identity and love for one's birthplace. And then the last one we have here, Uhaw sa Tigang na Lupa. So this is written by Liwayway Arceo. So Arceo's novel grapples with the harsh realities of rural life and the unwavering human spirit. So it follows a community during a drought where the land's thirst mirror the inhabitants' yearning for hope and change. So you see the metaphor there? Mhm. So those are the different notable works during Japanese occupation. So what do you think is next? Okay, what tsaka yung next na to, Ani? So the next one we have here, liberation period. Do you have any idea what happens here? So when they say liberation period, Filipino writers mastered English and familiarized themselves with diverse literary techniques. Now, this um during this time, bountiful harvest in fiction, poetry, fiction, drama, and essays. Okay. And journalistic and literary criticism now emerged. Excuse me. So also in liberation period, literary giants appeared like Nick Joaquin, um, N.V.M. Gonzalez, Bienvenido Santos, and Gilda Corredo Fernando. So muna siya mga um they became really well known during liberation period. The next literary guilds and awards were established to honor outstanding works. Common themes focus on the search for identity, homesickness, rural life, and conditions in rural community. So the theme of rural life still continues from Japanese occupation to liberation period. Okay, so a few notable works a few notable works here in Liberation period. We have The Wedding Dance by Amado Daggio, which is we're gonna read this one as well. So dwells on love and marriage among local ethnic people. We also have here Children of the City, Amadis Maria Guerrero, which enters on the abandonment child on the streets of Manila. The last one we have here, The Day the Dancers Came. This is written by Benvenido Santos, which talks about homesickness and ex and expatriates. Okay, next. So from liberation period, let us move on to modern period. Now, during this time, this happened during the declaration, around the so this happened around the declaration of martial law in the Philippines. Okay, so the declaration of martial law repressed Filipino writers to write delicate subject matters, particularly about prevailing crisis during the period. Okay, so writers used symbolism and allegories to drive home their message. So it was not really direct. Okay, it's not a direct hit, but they try to use symbolisms, to just hide the facade of what they were trying to tell. Okay. And theaters were used as a vehicle to protest, such as PETA and UP Theater. Muna siya ang mga theaters that they used. Campus newspapers showed rebellious emotions. And then probably this was all because of the martial law. Muna siya murag na daghan nga mga themes. They want to express themselves with what happened during martial law. Though I wasn't there. And yes, a lot of people were not happy during that one, during those times. But moving on, bilingual education was initiated in public and private schools, and from the 80s onward, writers continued dynamism and innovation. Another one, the irrelevance of the poor reached its peak during this period. The Carlos Valanca Awards continued to give annual awards to literary masters. So if you've heard, you've heard of this kind of award, right? Given to different authors, really well known in the Philippines. Almost all themes of most writings dealt with the development and progress of the country. Themes of most poems dealt with patience regarding for native culture, customs, and beauties of nature and surroundings. And the last one, the government led in reviving old plays and dramas. So a few notable works during this modern period, we have here Dekada 70s by Luwalhati Bautista, which focuses on the life of Filipinos during martial law regime. Okay, and then we have here Rosales Saga, written by Sionel Jose, and Flowers of May by Francisco Arceliana. Okay, so moving on, this is going to be the last one of the timeline, which is the 21st century. So what do you think happened? What literary works emerged in this century? So the themes have changed from sentimentalized romanticism to more realistic and naturalistic delineation. Now, gay and lesbian literature came out because people became more open to this topics. Back then, this was really a taboo topic, but these days it became a norm. Sometimes I do think whether it's that norm is right or wrong. It really does depend on one's point of view. And yeah. Next is strong feminist tendencies are evident and more social problems tackled because of the openness of Filipinos during 21st century. No one's scared to write anymore. Like if they want to address an issue, they want to write about it. No one's stopping you. People are more open. How can like authors are bolder than ever. That's what I want to say. And TV and films have become more popular. Okay. Now, daring or controversial choice of subject matter also emerged here. Like I tell you, like what I said a while ago, authors are they just let their imaginations go wild. Mm. Next, a very innovative in structure and style, and then characters, plot structure, and narrative techniques are more complex. This is what happened during the 21st century. So, a few notable works in the 21st century, we have Ladlad by Danton Remoto, uh, chronicles the lifestyle of gays and the dilemmas they encounter in life. Women Living, stories and play by Joanna Lynn Cruz, the anthropology of lesson-themed stories. So see, I told you a while ago, it's people became more open to these stories. They don't they don't hide behind the curtain anymore. So they just go right and publish stories. And then we have just a series by uh, Jessica Jessica Zafra, a collection of essays about current events, technologies, and life in the society. Okay. So I hope you learned something new in the 20, not just in 21st century, but I hope you learned something new throughout the timeline here in Philippine literature. I just wonder, with all the notable works that I mentioned a while ago, I just wonder which one, aside from Noli Me Tangere and Il Filibusterismo, okay, what were the stories that were mentioned a while ago that you have read back then? So I'm looking forward to your answer in the chat box because that's how I'm gonna know that you were able to make it through this part of the video. Okay. So, um, or if you weren't able to read any, which story are you most looking forward to read from those different stories that I've mentioned throughout the timeline? So comment. So before as this video ends, comment your answer in the chat box, okay? Not in Probably not in YouTube, but the chat box in RGC. Okay. So if you also have any question, please do write it down in the chat box in the GC. So that's it for the timeline of Philippine literature. I hope you learned something today, and I'm looking forward to our face-to-face session next meeting. That's it. Goodbye, God bless, and take care. See you.